So can you give me the high sign when I'm getting close to 10 or 15? Thank you, friend. You gotta have a friend. Since primarily most people know me as a poet, I'm gonna start with a poem because those are the books they have in the store. I love this bookstore. I love all the independent bookstores in Chicago. We rock. Boom. Okay, so I'm gonna read this poem from Refuse to Disappear because it seems like the most relevant. Litany for Lieutenant Nyota Uhura. Hey. Jet black curl whipped past her ear, lined to the rounded angle of cheek, matched to meticulous batwing eyeliner. The red line sleek against thigh, then calves interrupted by black boots. But first, benediction. In praise of communicator chips, in praise of the flashing monitors, in praise of the swirling chair that gave of her sharp lashes and poised vista of face. Enough, yet not enough. Martin Luther King, another captain of sorts, offered his gospel. She was to be seen rocketing toward future. She is the vessel that carries and delivers when she is navigator, guide, and seer. She is the vessel that carries and delivers. How often she is captain without title, blamed as commander without privilege. Question: did the Vulcan ever ask her about what it feels like to be different? He removed his pointy ears and brows daily, ruffled his hair to normalcy, released his anesthetizing grip. She takes off the wig, but still wears herself, irreversible skin. She becomes vessel that carries and delivers. She serves as navigator, guide, and seer. She is the vessel that carries and delivers. How often she is captain without title, commander without privilege. The conversation that never happened. I waited for you and Sulu to cast glances like unwritten spells, give each other silent nods, forge some way to defect if aliens became allies. If the captain barked too many times and forgot you were not just polished umber to fantasize about in a later episode. When you recall your surname means freedom and Sulu seed touches Asia. When slavery and internment camps failed to turn your ancestors to dust, you, fourth in command, a helmsman, never called lieutenant, could direct a story and steer the Starship Enterprise. So I found out today is the 8th anniversary of the anthology Octavia's Brood, which is where I published my first science fiction story. And I'm still like, oh my God, I actually did it. I pulled the trigger. But now I'm starting. So if you can, they don't have it at the store. It's on the volume's website, and I didn't bring my copy. I looked all over for the book. So I'm going to read something different. Well, actually, I do. I printed it out, but I'm just like, maybe I'll read an excerpt. I'll read this short piece. During the pandemic, I started on an idea for a YA novel, and I'm thinking about writing more. Let me know what y'all think. This is the beginning. How seeds travel seems like such an odd ancient path. They go wherever the wind takes them. They travel on the slight bodies of bees and the feathers of eager birds. They nestle in the dirt until moisture, pressure, and time approves. Then they crack open with something magical, green, and almost impossible. I never get tired of that magic, that feeling of new life growing out of such tiny, simple conditions. It brings me back to Hope Community Garden. Every spring pushes me through the hot summer days, and it feels downright glorious when August comes, and the fruits and vegetables are colorful, and trellises are heavy with vines and beans. Some people think it's silly because it's not fried. You do all that work when you could get a 2-piece with some bread, fries, and mild sauce. But Mr. Ellis, the main gardener who runs Hope, reminds me otherwise. Mr. Ellis reminds me of the Great Migration. Decades ago, Black people came to Chicago and other cities from the South to find opportunities. They wanted better jobs, and they hoped to escape the racism of the South. Many of them had grown crops and knew how to garden. They grew their own food if they could. Some of their ancestors made plantation owners rich during slavery, and not long after, Black sharecroppers made even more money for white landowners by charging more rent for supplies and cabins that were more like shacks. I still wonder if they would have stayed if they knew the country would have been like this. This is not the history that I learned at school. They tell us about the Great Migration, and it seems hard to believe that those are the people we came from. They seem so far away. But Mr. Ellis will be pulling up weeds or pouring compost into a pot, and he makes those people up close and personal to me. Imagine how people won't let you be free, but the only thing you can control is a little bit of your food and how you make it. I know he's telling me something deep. I'm nodding before he decides to go weed another part of the garden and starts humming a Stevie Wonder song that my mama likes. I hear, "Don't you worry about a thing, mama," before my fingers are deep in the dirt. I clear the tangled weeds and white-headed dandelions out of an old raised bed that no one has claimed in a long time. It's better if they're clean and ready. Sometimes, if no one uses a bed and we have extra seeds, we plant them there. It's nice to be able to share what we grow. Mama says I started going to the garden with her as soon as I could walk. She said I was just out of diapers and in overalls and giggling when I petted the plants. Mr. Ellis became my fast friend. Sometimes he would bring a radio to his apartment window next to the garden and play old music. Stevie Wonder is his favorite. He has a big smile and always has a pair of thick gardening gloves to share. Mr. Ellis's soft wrinkles match the earth that he loves so much, and his laugh sometimes booms across the garden. Mama heard him sometimes, and she'd ask me later, "What joke you tell, Mr. Ellis?" The garden was on a lot that had never had a building on it since I had been alive. Mr. Ellis says the prairie grass filled it after they tore a burned building down after the race riots in the 1960s. To me, that's another century, almost 100 years later. We survived what people called the pandemic. A disease wiped out so many black people, and the doctors and politicians took too long to find a vaccine. By the time they did, I guess it was worse than the 1960s. Grocery stores disappeared, families were devastated, and people just stopped coming to the South Side altogether. Some of us liked it that way. We figured out how to recycle and compost and started harvesting seeds from vegetables. Some people from other places found ways to trade with us, but that's all history. It's 2040, and we're in the garden that we made from land no one wanted because summers are short. It is a cold late April, and we are preparing the land for seeds and seedlings that will probably go into the ground in May if the weather lets us. The weeds are gone. I've sifted out a couple of bottles and tin cans. Mr. Ellis said there used to be trash, old car parts, and potato chip bags all over this land. Then we wouldn't even get new cars or potato chips, so we focused on necessities. I thought about the word necessities while I sifted through the dirt. The potato bugs and worms were not happy. They scurried and wriggled away from my hands. I know they are useful for the dirt. I smile. Mr. Ellis says I could be a master horticulturalist. I know how to grow plants from seeds, cuttings from other plants and seedlings. I figured out which weeds are edible and how to grow things inside. Mama even found me some Latin flashcards so I can learn the names of plants from the old books that have survived. I am practicing the names of plants in my head when I spot the tiniest splash of purple peeking out from underneath the soil, below all the junk I just removed. I couldn't believe something was growing under all that, and they still talk about that Tupac Shakur poem, "The Rose That Grew from Concrete." The leaves were tiny, tiny, and a little bushy, like tiny hairs on the stem. I took the bottle to the recycle bin. Now that it was uncovered, it started to look up and reach to the sun, just a little bit. That was only a few minutes. Plants are usually much slower. So I'm leaving it off there, but what happens is, and I have a missing page, she takes the jar home, the jar starts to light up, the plant comes out of the jar, starts spelling things on the wall, and that's where I left off. So she's learning that this plant can only grow on the south side, you know. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with ZZ and the plant, you know, because, you know, when things are special to a place, people like to move things around and prioritize and commodify them. So I'm really interested to see what ZZ and the peeps do. I'll read a little bit of this story. I'm not going to read it all because it's going to be way too long. Where am I at? Oh, shit. Okay. I'll just read the opening then. Runway blackout. Therianthropes. Runway blackout. Therianthropes. That's technically what they're called, but they weren't just throwbacks to Circe or skinwalkers. They were the replacements for the supermodel. No more worries about weight complaints and skin discoloration or scars. In fact, sometimes an entire magazine only required one model for all of the issue's glossy pages. Where did it start, you ask? Well, as people started to date more interracially, whatever that means, different genes started popping up. Not just the dark-skinned people with green eyes or white-looking people with afros or albinos with features like elegant African masks and almond-shaped eyes. It wasn't those surface changes that mattered anymore. It was the genetic traits that no one expected, bigger than illnesses like sickle cell, Tay-Sachs, or Tourette's. There were the secrets that people managed to hide from their children and spouses and had started to fade out. But the splicing of gene pools somehow revived these traits, the traits of shape-shifting. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, guys.